Ford Mustang is one of the most iconic and recognizable cars on the road today. Since they first drove out of the factory in 1964, they've remained an expertly crafted symbol of automotive style. But it wasn't until their second year of production in 1965 when professional racer and industry innovator Carroll Shelby joined forces with Ford to introduce the second stage manufactured Shelby series, driving the Mustang straight into the annals of automotive history. This car was one of 335, a street machine that was once owned by the legend that bears its name, which in essence makes it one of one. This is the Shelby GT-500.
In the 1960s, probably one of the best decades of the country. And all kinds of things were invented in the marketplace in those days. Ford Motor Company, as an example, had this idea of a very personal, sporty car. The Mustang was born, and it captured the imagination of the whole country.
It was really something for everyone. It was a six-cylinder economy car, and you had a high-performance 289 at the other end, and there was everything in between. So it was a fabulous success virtually overnight. I mean, within 2 years, they'd sold 1 million cars, which was just unheard of.
In 1965, Lee Iacocca and the executives at Ford realized they needed to get farther down the proverbial road, and the only way to do that was to put the Mustang on the racetrack. And at that time, there was nobody better equipped to turn a production car into a race car than Carroll Shelby and Shelby American.
Shelby was associated with the Cobra in winning things like world championships and beating Ferrari at his own game in 1965 in the GT class. Carroll Shelby was also very involved with the team that won at Le Mans with Ford Motor Company with the Ford GT, and that was 50 years ago, right?
It was the height of the muscle car era, and everyone wanted a car with stout shoulders and a throaty growl. Shelby's second stage Mustang fit the bill, offering true racing heritage and contentious, menacing style.
So when you look at the brand and you look at Mustang and you look at Shelby into 1969, the public wanted to feel some of that racing heritage, but something they could also live with on the street and bruise it up on the boulevard.
A new generation of automobiles, it started, called pony cars. They came to Carroll because he was winning races all over the world and said, hey, what can you do with it? And that's when the GT350 started to evolve and became tremendously iconic.
So in 1967, for the first time, the Mustang had a little competition. You had Camaro, you had Barracuda, you had some other competition from some of the other brands, and all of a sudden the pony car wars started. And as that happened, you know, the way you get ahead on the street is you put a bigger hammer under the hood. So that evolved from the small, edgy, nimble road course car to the slightly larger, more creature comforts, but then more of a boulevard bruiser with a big block V8. And that's what really came out and became the GT-500 in 1967.
The new Shelby was the ultimate road touring vehicle. Muscular, aggressive, and born on the track. One Shelby GT-500 convertible belonging to Carroll himself showcases Shelby's most successful design and power upgrades. At the heart of this incredible car was the intimidating and big 428 Cobra jet. Though the engine was purported to push 335 horsepower, most people believe this was a bit underrated. With 440 foot-pounds of torque and the weight distribution pushed forward, putting 50% of the car's bulk over the front wheels, there was no doubt the car was a powerful and formidable machine.
So little old 289, which is an unbelievable performance engine, went from the 289 to the 302 in '68, and it was less horsepower. It was 250 horsepower in the GT350s. Well, the viewpoint was, this is really not a performance engine, because what they were running up against was GM with 396s, 427s, Chrysler with 426 Hemis. So They got into building an engine, and I'll add that Bob Tasca, who built some of the fastest Mustangs that ever drag raced in the 60s, Bobby got involved in that engine, and he took what he called the Ford parts bin, and he modified it. Matter of fact, every time they made an engine modification in Tasca's speed shop, they'd take it out in front of the dealership. Every evening in Providence, they made the modification. They had a quarter mile measured off, and he'd run it and time it. And when he got to a point where he said, now this engine is competitive, Ford took it and put it into production online. It came offline at Ford, known as the 428 Cobra Jet. So then it all changed, because then the Shelbys went from a 350 to a 500. Then in May of 1968, the 500s disappeared and the GT-500 KR, King of the Road, came on board with the 428 Cobra Jet. And that was a bit of a fire breather.
By the end of 1969, Ford and Shelby had officially parted ways, with Carroll returning his focus to other projects developed by his Shelby American brand. Ford then took a selection of unsold 69 models and outfitted them with new VIN numbers, ultimately selling them as 70 models. Though consecutive models in the early 70s maintained some of the Shelby flair, for the next handful of decades the Mustang went through a litany of design changes and reimagining. And the Shelby name wouldn't reappear on a Ford for nearly 40 years in the United States, when in 2005 the allure of American muscle saw a massive resurgence, and people were once again looking for rides with that aggressive Shelby styling. The post-millennial Shelbys honored the styling and general aesthetic of the originals, giving a stolid nod to the car's deeply rooted race sensibilities. The newer Shelbys are built on the nostalgia and pedigree of the '69 Shelby GT-500, a car symbolizing the peak of automotive perfection characterizing an era.
So when I think of a GT500 Shelby Mustang, I think of the whole range of GT500s, which has just been fabulous over time. Starting with the 1967 with the big block, 2 4-barrel carburetors, clear up to the latest one in 2014 when it had 662 horses, and it was this big 5.8 liter supercharged, and then of course we made Super Snakes out of those, 850 horses. So the whole Shelby GT500 thing is iconic, and it's huge but it's always been a boulevard bruiser. I look at that car and I can see my son as a young boy in it with Carroll Shelby, and myself and my boys, and taking it home in the garage, and we're laying underneath it and making sure that the fuel lines are right. So I have my own personal history with the car and so forth, so it's special to me in that way.
The '69 Shelby GT-500 transcends typical muscle car appreciation. It defined an era and redefined the term legendary. A '69 Shelby is a car enthusiast's holy grail. Just getting the opportunity to see one in person is an enviable achievement.
I do like the '69 Shelby and its unique features. I like the fact that unlike the other hundreds of thousands of Mustangs there were, that car did stand out. It was unique, it was different. None of the other production Mustangs had fiberglass hoods and fenders and naked ducts in the hood and scoops on the sides as much. There were other cars that Ford was starting to build that in fact were quite exciting, and for me personally, I loved them too. I still have the '69 Mach 1 with the shaker hood scoop and all that I bought when I was 16 with money I made mowing lawn. But the Shelby was really still the pinnacle, the peak. If you wanted the high water mark in any one thing, the Shelby was really it.
There are very few cars that are viewed with the reverence and awe of seeing an important historical artifact. But Shelby's personal convertible '69 does. It's more than a car. It is the embodiment of American car culture. It was all the elements of automotive innovation and artistry done right.